Hello, I'm Rebecca Weber. You're watching Better for America, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. Joining me today is Rick Black. He is the director of CEAR, that's CEAR, the Center for State Administration Reform. And we have a great episode. We're going to dive into the exploitation of seniors, something everyone listening should know more about. We'll learn how the legal community and equity court proceedings are handling this issue. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.
Rick, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here. For those who aren't familiar, I'd like to begin by giving you a chance to please tell our listeners, what is CEAR and what does it seek to accomplish?
Yes, CEAR is the Center for State Administration Reform. It's a 501c3 that my wife and I and a Colorado attorney founded back in the beginning of 2018. And this was after approximately a 5-year effort working with other national activist groups on this, trying to bring attention to the issue of predatory attorneys targeting vulnerable adults, most often seniors and seniors of wealth. So we've been operational for now going on our 6th year, and we've counseled over 5,000 families, investigated or counseled over 5,000 families since we began our work back in 2013, and we take calls 7 days a week.
This is really very important. Congratulations. I'm thrilled to hear that you founded this organization. I think that many people, including myself, were not as educated on what really is impacting how seniors are being exploited and how the legal community is participating in that. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Sure. Sadly, when you meet with an attorney to draft your state documents, advance directives, you are giving the keys to your kingdom to a third party. And most of us don't spend our time vetting attorneys to make sure that they're honest, that they're going to best serve your wishes as documented in those documents. But at the moment that you begin to converse with them, you are giving them insights on your family's dynamics, on your net worth, that can make you extremely vulnerable if that attorney is a predatory attorney, and there are many within the system. What really has driven us on this agenda over the last 10 years is when they then file for guardianship over an individual. Once that order for guardianship or conservatorship or curatorship, it's called different things in different states, but generically it's guardianship, and specifically guardian of the estate. A third party now controls your entire estate and all of your decisions. And this can be done completely unlawful to the statutes derived in each state on the books, because these attorneys have learned long ago, because of the lack of oversight in our equity court system and the ability for attorneys to work together, that they can create a narrative that completely dupes a judge and allows them to inappropriately get control of you and your estate.
Unbelievable. It's hard to imagine that there are people, predators out there, that I imagine they're motivated by money. That's certainly, it seems, what they seem to be getting at, and control over your estate. I understand, Rick, that you yourself had an unfortunate experience. I believe it was your father-in-law who was the main catalyst for the creation of CEAR. If you could tell us a little bit about that story and why it motivated you and your wife to jump into this field full time.
Yeah, my wife's an only child, and I envied the relationship that she had with her father, Italian family, for the 40 years that I knew him. Sadly, he got dementia. He had retired in Las Vegas, was living with a family friend, and we discovered, my wife, because she was on all of his estate documents, was clearly his and was his executor on his will. But she discovered that the family friend had forged 3 checks totaling $220,000 and was exploiting him financially due to his growing dementia. We knew he was vulnerable. He seemed happy. We had visited just 6 months prior. This is back in 2013. And we never believed that a family acquaintance, friend, lover to some degree, would choose to take advantage of a vulnerable senior and completely deceive the entire family on our intentions. When we made the discovery, we went to his aid, and the roommate, landlord, girlfriend, who at that point was about 75, took him hostage, captive, due to his vulnerabilities. And when we went to the police, we immediately flew to Vegas, where he was retired, presented the forged checks to the police, asked them to intervene to get him out of her home, and they refused to do it, which is typical nationwide, even with the compelling material evidence of 3 forged checks totaling $220,000, and the fact that he was being held captive in her home. The police suggested we file for guardianship, and that took us down an odyssey that I honestly thought couldn't happen in our country. One, that law enforcement wouldn't investigate a clear criminal act, and secondly, that their referral to the equity court and guardianship would put us into a Kafkaesque reality that, again, most of your listeners will say that just can't happen in the U.S. And I'm here to say it happens routinely. We filed for guardianship of her father. The petition was clearly reviewed by court insiders, and overnight the exploiter had a raft of attorneys defending her and making sure that my wife's dad stayed isolated from all the family. In a summary, we did not get guardianship. The exploiter got guardianship. He stayed in her home, isolated from family for the remaining 2 years of his life, and it cost our family over $1 million. The first time I was ever in a courtroom was the first hearing on August 28th of 2013. And that experience changed my life forever, because what our attorneys told us to expect, what we had been raised to expect watching Perry Mason and Judge Judy, isn't what happened at all. It was a setup from the start, and the players who made a living in that courtroom fully intended on exploiting all of us, and were successful in that regard. The only silver lining in our story is we had plenty of evidence. We were dogged in our advocacy for my wife's dad, and we ultimately got a criminal investigation and conviction of the exploiter. But in the 4 years from 13 to 17 that it finally took to get her to trial and get a criminal conviction, the estate had been laid waste and he was long gone. So a small victory, but a victory nonetheless.
Wow. So often it seems that, we don't think these kinds of things could ever happen to us or to our loved ones until it does. So educating ourselves and being aware of these potential threats is such an important step in preventing it. Now, what is some of the most common exploitation mechanisms that you're seeing or hearing? What are the common stories that you're hearing today? Is it along those lines of what you just described?
Sadly, it is. We coined a phrase years ago: isolate the victim, defame legitimate protectors, and loot the estate. Control of the body in these affairs is rather critical. And so older folks, after their spouse has passed, who are alone, maybe thousands of miles from their children, become even more vulnerable than they had been prior. because the isolation, the distance is the friend of an exploiter. And an attorney who has all the insights on the dynamics of your family, it truly gives them the keys to your kingdom. And that could be done through durable power of attorney frauds, trust frauds, generic probate frauds, and then, of course, adult guardianship conservatorship frauds. But the gambit runs across all four areas. We call it estate trafficking. Originally, when we were working with federal officials, we called it human trafficking. And human trafficking is a very clearly defined criminal code within the federal statutes, and it doesn't apply to this. So we came up with a phrase, a description that was suitable to the FBI called estate trafficking. It's not used in the federal code, but what is occurring is similar to drug trafficking, gun trafficking, and other illicit trade of goods that are obtained at pennies on the dollar. And in the case of guardianship or trust fraud, it's the estate is attached for mere pennies.
So for people who are listening, who say, boy, I want to make sure that this doesn't happen to me, what advice, what helpful tips could you give those listening to ensure that the likelihood of this kind of thing occurring in the event that they do, upon their demise, or if they're slowly, unfortunately, experiencing some sort of debilitating disease, how do people protect themselves?
Well, number one, you must define an agent, a surrogate who you trust and who will come to your aid if you're targeted. So our strongest recommendation, and you can do this for free by pulling forms off the internet, is to execute a durable power of attorney and a healthcare surrogate or healthcare advance directive, naming an agent and a successor agent on those documents. And most importantly, after you have them notarized, you sit down with those agents and give them a copy of that document. And make sure that they understand that you are contracting with them, that if you become vulnerable or cannot speak for yourself, that they're to come to your aid and support you in that regard. It's a temporary contract. It's one that you can at any time dismiss, notify those parties, and create new parties that can protect you. But as soon as you turn 18, because you become an adult at that point, our strongest recommendation is to execute those documents and give them to your trusted and legitimate protector.
And people can get more of this information, more guidance, I imagine, on your website, CEAR, is that .org?
Yeah, it's CEARjustice.org. We couldn't reserve the CEAR.org, so go to www.cearjustice.org.
Excellent. That's so good. I think a lot of people will go there. Now, you've had so many successes in really making a true difference, and we so appreciate all that you've done. Tell us a little bit more about some of the government level changes that CEAR has brought about and what you're working on today.
Yeah, our biggest success on a federal level over the last 10 years, we were pushing to consolidate a number of bills referring to guardianship, adult guardianship, that had languished in Congress for a number of years. And in 15, 16, and 17, we lobbied for the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act to be passed into law. And President Trump signed it into law in October of 2017. What EAPA did, EAPPA, what it did was direct each federal district, 93 across America, to assign an assistant U.S. attorney as an elder justice coordinator who would assist in investigating crimes against seniors, those 50 and older. It had 5 titles in it. The 5th title was all about guardianship, which required the DOJ to issue an annual report on investigation and prosecution of crimes against seniors, and to make recommendations on national changes for adult guardianships. Because the listeners need to understand adult guardianships are managed within the state. And if you look across the 50 states and 6 territories that make up America, the rules vary considerably on transparency, on accountability, on exit ramps. And within that diversity, it creates opportunities for predatory litigators to take advantage of the third branch of our court. Criminal courts are funded by the government. Civil courts are generally heard by juries and funded by big corporations that want to make sure that they operate cleanly. And then the equity court, which we derisively call the family squabbles court, because that's where divorce, child custody, adult guardianship, juvenile delinquency, and probate matters are heard. Those are almost unilaterally heard by a county judge or magistrate. There's not a jury in those proceedings, and becomes a very cozy environment where those who make their money, those attorneys who make their money in courtrooms, can very much tilt the dialogue and what the judges hear to best serve their wallets versus best serving the public. So federal oversight was a priority from the start, and EPA has given us some improvement. We've seen an increase in federal prosecutions of attorneys, some professional guardians who are committing what we term estate trafficking. But this is standard wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, and it has yielded an improvement. We are now working to consolidate 2 current bills and 1 languishing bill to try to get direct oversight and influence at the federal level on how states adjudicate adult guardianships and provide downstream oversight after the order is signed. In March, Senator Mike Braun introduced Senate Bill 1126. That would require Social Security funds to be allocated to pay for free respondent counsel to ensure when someone is being petitioned for guardianship that their civil rights and ADA rights are protected. Because the moment a order for guardianship is written, that person is deemed disabled by the decision of the attorneys who pled and the judge who signed the order. And representation from the onset, before that order is written, is absolutely critical to protecting the rights and the estates of these individuals. So Senate Bill 1126 by Senator Mike Braun out of Indiana is a key improvement. It needs further improvements, and we're working on that. That same day, Senator Robert Casey, chairman of the Special Committee on Aging, Democrat, introduced Senate Bill 1148. 1148, sadly, is another Band-Aid bill that really doesn't help. It's a Bill of Rights for respondents and those petitioned for guardianship, but there's no stick to it. There's no punishment if someone chooses not to respect the federal laws that protect the rights of all Americans. The third bill, which was introduced in the 3 previous Congresses, but not in the 118th, is the Guardianship Accountability Act. And the Guardianship Accountability Act helps us get numbers. No state keeps accurate records on the number of individuals who are conscripted into adult guardianships or the total wealth that is intercepted by that conscription into guardianship. The Guardianship Accountability Act, which was H.R. 5600 and Senate Bill 2881 in the 117th, bipartisan support. Both chambers supported it, but sadly, it never got to the floor for a vote. But the federal government forcing each state to track the number of adult guardianships so that we can look at trends, track the total assets that are assumed by that magical, mystical order for guardianship, is critical for us to get our arms around what's growing nationwide.
So, Rick, just to put this all into perspective, how many people are currently under guardianship, and what do the real numbers look like?
We don't know because each state doesn't keep track of it, but the last estimate nationally, which was done by the National Center for State Courts, which is funded by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2015, they estimated the number at that time was 1.3 million. Using average net worth of Americans, that means a pool of approximately $300 billion in net worth that is now transferred to the control of a third party with very little oversight, as data would reveal on how these courts operate. That also pools an additional $50 billion, B as in Bravo, $50 billion a year into the system. So it's important people understand, while this may only affect 2 or 3% of our aging community, it is a big, big number to each state bar, and particularly the predatory members that serve this demographic.
Yeah, this is terrific that you've made so much headway. I'm just so proud of the great work that you're doing. And in 2024, AMAC Action, our C4, we do a lot of work on Capitol Hill. We want to support you and your efforts in any way, in every way possible. This is so important. You're doing great work to protect our seniors, and truly, truly, we thank you. I'd love to get more information up on our site to help educate our own members and direct them over to your site. So looking forward to working together. This is an issue that we've got to continue the fight, make sure that we're protecting our most vulnerable. Rick Black, it was an absolute honor to have you with me today, and thank you so much for all of the great work that you're doing.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And to all of you out there listening, make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast so that more people learn about us. Have a wonderful day. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and God bless you. Have you ever wished someone could plan your dream vacation? Collette Guided Travel comes with benefits that will take your guided travel experience to another level. You'll experience must-sees and connect with the people and the culture that define a destination. You'll eat in locals' homes, take cooking classes, travel by trains, and even stay in igloos, castles, or chateaus. With over 175 tours to all 7 continents and 5 distinct travel styles, Collette has the tour for you. Plus, AMAC members save an extra $50 to $100 off every tour. Go ahead and visit Collette.com/AMAC to learn more.